Michael Reed once had a life that looked perfect from the outside. He lived in a quiet suburb of Chicago with his wife, Emily, and their 6-year-old son, Ben. Every morning, he would wake up to the sound of Ben's laughter echoing through the small house. Emily would hum while making pancakes, and Michael would sit at the kitchen table reading the newspaper, smiling at how lucky he was. He worked as an auto mechanic at a local company called Harrison Motors. He loved fixing engines and had big dreams of opening his own repair shop one day. People liked him because he was honest, kind, and hard-working. His life was simple but it was full of love. Then came the night that changed everything. It was raining hard, one of those nights when the streets of Chicago looked like mirrors. Emily had called Michael, telling him she was driving home from visiting her sister. Michael told her to drive slowly. She laughed and said, "Don't worry, Mike. You worry too much." That was the last time he ever heard her voice. An hour later, his phone rang again. A police officer's voice came through, calm but heavy. There had been an accident on Route 41. A truck had lost control. Emily's car was hit. She didn't make it. Michael stood frozen in his kitchen, the phone slipping from his hand. The sound of it hitting the floor echoed through the empty house. He ran out into the rain without thinking, without his coat, without shoes, just running, like maybe he could reach her before it was too late. At the hospital, he saw her face one last time. Peaceful. Still. Unreal. He felt like the world had stopped breathing. Then a nurse walked over with quiet eyes and said something that broke him completely. "I'm so sorry, sir. Your son, he didn't survive either." The world turned dark. The days that followed were a blur. Michael didn't eat. He didn't sleep. People came to the funeral, said words he didn't hear. The flowers wilted. The food went cold. His home became a place filled with silence and ghosts. He tried to return to work after a few weeks, but the sound of car engines reminded him of the day he told Emily to drive safe. Every wrench, every tool, every smell of oil brought memories rushing back. He made mistakes at work. He forgot steps. His boss, Mr. Harrison, tried to be patient but the company couldn't carry him forever. One afternoon, his boss called him in and said, "Mike, I'm sorry. You're one of the best we've had, but you're not yourself anymore. We have to let you go." Michael nodded without saying a word. He didn't blame anyone. He just walked out, carrying a small box with his tools. The world outside looked gray, even though the sun was shining. Bills started to pile up. He sold the car, then the house. The pictures of his family went into a small bag. With no job and nowhere to go, Michael drifted from one cheap motel to another until the money was gone. He found himself walking through downtown Chicago, hungry and tired, wearing an old jacket and carrying nothing but a photo of Emily and Ben. People passed him like he didn't exist. Bright signs flashed above restaurants and stores, but none of it mattered. He sat on a bench under a broken streetlight and stared at the picture, whispering, "I'm sorry. I couldn't protect you." Rain started again. Cold drops fell on his face, mixing with tears. For a moment, he thought about ending it all, just walking to the bridge and letting the river take everything away. He got up and started walking toward the bridge. Each step felt heavier. The city lights blurred. Cars moved fast, and horns echoed through the night. When he reached the bridge, he stopped and looked down at the dark water below. It moved slowly, as if waiting. Then, out of the corner of his eye, he saw someone sitting nearby, a man with a long beard and old army jacket, feeding a small stray dog. The man tore his last piece of bread in half, giving part to the dog and keeping a small piece for himself. He smiled at the dog like they were old friends. Michael watched quietly. He couldn't understand it. How could this man, who clearly had nothing, still smile? Still share? The man looked up and noticed him staring. "You hungry, buddy?" he asked, holding out a piece of bread. Michael hesitated, then shook his head. "No. I'm fine." The man chuckled softly. "You don't look fine. Nobody out here is fine. But we keep going anyway." Those simple words hit Michael harder than anything else. We keep going anyway. He stood there for a long time, staring at the water, then looked back at the man and the dog. Something in his chest changed, just a small spark, but it was there. Michael turned away from the bridge and started walking again. The rain still fell, but now it felt different, like the sky was crying with him, not against him. He didn't know where he was going. He didn't know what he would do tomorrow. But one thought kept repeating in his mind, over and over. I can't give up. Not yet. The next morning, Michael woke up on a cold bench near the train station. His jacket was wet from the night rain, and his body ached from sleeping rough. For a moment, he didn't know where he was. Then it all came back: the accident, the job, the house. The weight of his loss pressed down on him like a mountain. He sat up slowly, watching people rush by with coffee cups and briefcases. Everyone looked busy, alive, and full of purpose. Michael felt like a ghost drifting through a city that no longer saw him. He reached into his pocket and found his last $30. That was all he had left. He looked up at the big train board and saw a bus heading west to Denver. Something inside whispered, maybe you'll find peace there. He didn't think twice. He bought a ticket and left Chicago behind. The ride to Denver was long and silent. Michael stared out the window as endless roads, gas stations, and small towns passed by. He saw mountains for the first time in years, tall, quiet, and unmoving. They made him feel small, but also somehow safe. When he arrived in Denver, he stepped off the bus with no plan, no friends, and no home. The cold air hit his face, and for a second, he just stood there, unsure what to do next. He walked until his feet hurt. He found a small homeless shelter near Colfax Avenue. The man at the door looked tired but kind. You can stay here for the night, he said. Food's at 6. Don't miss it. That night, Michael ate a bowl of hot soup for the first time in days. Around him, people talked quietly about their lives: lost jobs, broken families, addictions. Each story was heavy, but none of them had given up completely. It made Michael realize he wasn't the only one carrying pain. He lay in the bunk bed staring at the ceiling. The smell of dust and old blankets filled the air. He whispered, I'll start again tomorrow. Somehow. The next few days were hard. He searched for work, walking from shop to shop. Most places turned him away. Sorry, no openings. We're not hiring. Try somewhere else. He cleaned dishes at a diner for 2 days but was fired when the owner found out he didn't have a permanent address. He picked up trash on the streets for a few dollars, saving every coin in a paper cup. Each night, he sat outside the shelter, looking up at the stars. The city lights dimmed them, but he could still see a few twinkling through the haze. He thought of Emily and Ben, wondering if they could see him too. One afternoon, as he walked down a quiet street, he noticed a small, old garage with a faded sign, Harris Auto Repair. The doors were half open, and an older man was inside, struggling to lift an engine part. Without thinking, Michael ran over and said, Need a hand? The man looked at him suspiciously but nodded. Together they pushed the heavy part onto a workbench. When it was done, the man wiped sweat from his forehead and said, Thanks, stranger. Name's Tom Harris. Michael, he replied. Tom looked him over. You look like you've worked with engines before. Michael gave a small smile. Used to. Back in Chicago. Tom shrugged. Well, I could use some help around here. Pays not much, but it's honest work. For the first time in months, Michael felt hope flicker in his chest. I'll take it, he said quickly. The garage was old, but it smelled of oil and life, something he'd missed deeply. Tom was rough but fair. He taught Michael how to tune engines, replace filters, and handle customers. In return, Michael worked hard, sometimes late into the night. He started saving again. A few dollars each week. He began to sleep in a small room at the back of the garage, near the tools. It wasn't much, but it was safe. Slowly, the pain inside him began to soften, not disappear, but dull enough to breathe again. He even smiled sometimes, remembering how Emily used to tease him when he came home covered in grease. Tom noticed the change. You're a quiet one, he said one day. But I can tell you're a fighter. Michael nodded. Trying to be. Then, one evening, everything collapsed again. When Michael arrived at the garage the next morning, he saw flashing police lights. The front door was broken. The cash register was empty. Tools and parts were scattered everywhere. Tom was talking to an officer, his face pale. What happened? Michael asked, running up. Robbery, Tom said, shaking his head. They took everything. Cleaned me out. Before Michael could speak, the officer turned to him. You work here? Yes. The officer's tone hardened. We found your fingerprints on the cash drawer. Michael froze. Of course you did. I work here. I use it every day. Tom's face changed, confused, unsure. Mike, you didn't. I didn't. Michael shouted. But no one seemed to believe him. The police took him in for questioning. Sitting in that small, cold room, he stared at the metal table and thought, why does life keep doing this to me? He had no lawyer, no money, and no one to call. Just when he thought he was building something again, it was ripped away. That night, as the cell door closed, Michael sat in the dark, staring at the wall. The old man's words from the bridge echoed in his mind. We keep going anyway. He whispered those words again and again, like a promise to himself. Somewhere deep inside, something refused to break. The cell was small, cold, and silent. The only sound Michael could hear was the ticking of a clock somewhere outside. Each second felt heavier than the last. He sat on the hard metal bench, his hands shaking. He couldn't believe this was happening again. Just when life had started to look better, everything was falling apart. He tried to explain to the police that he was innocent, that he would never steal from Tom. But they only listened with blank faces, taking notes like robots. We'll check the evidence, one officer said before leaving. Michael was left alone again, surrounded by four gray walls. He thought about Emily and Ben. He remembered Ben's laugh, Emily's voice saying, keep your head up, Mike. He lowered his face into his hands. I'm trying, he whispered. But it's so hard. The next morning, Tom Harris came to visit. His face looked tired and older than before. For a second, neither of them spoke. Then Tom sighed. Mike, he said quietly, I don't know what to believe. The cops said your fingerprints were all over the drawer. Michael looked up, his eyes red. Because I used it every day. You know that, Tom. You trusted me. Tom studied his face. After a long pause, he said, yeah. I did. And I still want to. Those words hit Michael like sunlight breaking through dark clouds. I'll drop the charges, Tom said. But there's a catch. The garage is finished. The robbery took everything. I can't pay you anymore. Michael nodded slowly. I don't care about money. I'll help rebuild it. Tom gave a tired laugh. Rebuild? With what? We've got nothing left. Michael leaned forward. Then we start with nothing. Just like me. A week later, Michael was released. He went straight back to the garage. The place was a mess, broken windows, oil stains, shelves empty. But to him, it was still home. Tom joined him, shaking his head. You're crazy, Mike. You really think we can fix this? Michael smiled faintly. One bolt at a time. They started working from sunrise to sunset, using whatever tools they could find. Michael worked harder than he ever had before. His hands bled from sharp metal edges. His back ached every night. But he didn't stop. Each hammer strike felt like a punch against fate. One evening, Tom came in carrying an old photo. It showed him as a young man standing beside a red race car. That's me, Tom said with a proud smile. Used to race in the Colorado Street Circuit back in the day. That car, she was fast as hell. Michael looked at the picture. The car was dusty and broken now, sitting in the corner of the garage. That's her, isn't it? Tom nodded. Yeah. Been sitting there for 10 years. Thought about fixing her up again, but never had the time or money. Michael touched the hood, feeling the cold metal. What if we bring her back? Tom laughed. And do what? Enter the races again? We'd get laughed off the track. Michael shook his head. If we win one local race, maybe we get prize money. Enough to fix this place. Enough to start again. Tom studied him for a long moment. Then a slow smile appeared. You really don't give up, do you? Not anymore, Michael said. For the next few weeks, they worked on the old race car every night. The engine was almost dead, the tires dry, and the body rusted. But Michael treated it like a living thing. He cleaned, rebuilt, and polished every inch. Tom guided him, teaching him tricks from his racing days. Sometimes they argued. Sometimes they laughed. Slowly, the silence in the garage turned into life again. One rainy night, after hours of work, the car finally roared to life. The engine growled deep and strong, echoing off the garage walls. Michael jumped back, eyes wide with joy. "She's alive," he shouted. Tom grinned. "Yeah, she is. We'll call her the Phoenix because she's rising from ashes, just like us." Race day came fast. It was early morning, and the track outside Denver buzzed with noise, engines, crowds, and smell of fuel. Michael stood beside the Phoenix, wearing a simple leather jacket. He hadn't driven in years, but something deep inside him felt ready. Tom placed a hand on his shoulder. "You sure about this, kid? You could walk away right now." Michael shook his head. "Not this time." When the signal light turned green, engines roared like thunder. The race began. Michael's heart pounded as he gripped the wheel. The car jumped forward, fighting for space between the roaring machines. He wasn't the fastest at first, but he drove with focus, steady, determined. Each turn tested his strength. Each bump reminded him of his journey. Halfway through, another car hit his side. The Phoenix spun for a moment, nearly crashing into the barrier. The crowd gasped. Michael's mind screamed, "Not again. Don't lose again." He slammed the pedal down, straightened the car, and kept going. Tom's voice echoed through the radio, "Don't stop, Mike. Keep your head up." With each lap, he gained speed. The pain, the memories, the losses, all of it became fuel. By the final lap, he was in second place. He pushed harder, the engine roaring louder than ever before. As the finish line came into view, Michael whispered to himself, "This is for you, Emily. For you, Ben." The Phoenix crossed the line and the crowd exploded in cheers. He didn't win first place. But he came second, something no one expected from a man who had nothing. Reporters crowded around him, asking questions, flashing cameras. Tom laughed and hugged him. "You did it, Mike. You really did it." Michael smiled, tears mixing with sweat. "We did it." That night, back at the garage, he sat beside the car, listening to the quiet hum of the cooling engine. For the first time in a long time, he felt alive. He still had scars. He still had pain. But now, he had something stronger, hope. The sound of the cheering crowd still echoed in Michael's mind long after the race ended. It was the first time in years he had heard people shouting his name, not in pity, not in anger, but in respect. For the first time since losing everything, Michael felt like he mattered again. The next morning, the local Denver newspaper ran a headline. "Homeless mechanic shocks everyone, takes second place in street race." When Tom showed him the article, Michael could hardly believe it. His picture was there, standing beside the Phoenix, covered in grease and sweat, but smiling. He hadn't smiled like that in years. Tom chuckled. "Looks like we're famous, kid." Michael smiled back. "Fame doesn't matter. But this means we can rebuild." And rebuild they did. Over the next few weeks, the garage came back to life. People started showing up with cars to repair, not because of ads, but because they had heard about the man who never gave up. Some came just to shake Michael's hand. Others wanted to take pictures. Money started coming in slowly, but it was enough to fix the broken windows, repaint the sign, and buy new tools. Tom even hung a small banner inside the garage. "Reed and Harris Auto, built on hope." Every morning, Michael arrived early, cleaned the floor, tuned engines, and helped customers with a calm smile. The pain from the past was still there, but now it had turned into strength. Sometimes, when he was alone, he'd look at the picture of Emily and Ben on his workbench. He'd whisper, "I'm doing it. I'm finally doing it." One afternoon, a reporter from a local TV station came to interview him. The camera lights were bright, and Michael felt nervous. The reporter asked, "You've been through a lot: loss, homelessness, false accusations. What kept you going?" Michael looked down, thinking carefully before speaking. "When you lose everything," he said slowly, "you learn that giving up doesn't make the pain stop. It just makes it meaningless. I didn't want my family's memory to die with me. I wanted to live in a way they'd be proud of." The clip aired that evening. Within days, More people started visiting the garage, offering parts, donations, and even business partnerships. It felt like the universe was finally giving him a small piece of peace back. Tom laughed one morning, waving a new contract. "Mike, we've got enough work lined up for the next 3 months. We're really back on our feet." Michael grinned, wiping his hands on a rag. "Then let's make this place better than ever." But just when things seemed perfect again, life tested him one more time. Late one night, as Michael was closing the garage, he heard the faint sound of a car outside. The headlights flashed once, twice, and then a loud crash echoed through the street. He ran outside and saw a small car smashed into a pole. Smoke was rising. He rushed forward, pulling the door open. Inside was a young man, barely 20, dazed and bleeding from his forehead. Michael helped him out and called 911. As they waited for help, the boy whispered, I I was drinking. I didn't mean to." Michael looked at him, remembering his own loss, the accident that took Emily and Ben. His fists tightened, his jaw clenched. He could feel anger boiling inside. But then he saw fear in the boy's eyes, real, trembling fear. When the police arrived, they took the boy away. The officer thanked Michael for saving his life. Michael just stood there, silent, staring at the wrecked car. Tom found him there a few minutes later. "You okay?" he asked quietly. Michael nodded slowly. "Yeah. Just, memories." Tom put a hand on his shoulder. "You did the right thing, Mike. Not everyone would have helped." Michael looked at the ambulance lights fading in the distance. "Maybe that's the point. People helped me when I didn't deserve it either." The next morning, Michael arrived early again. He stared at the Phoenix, the car that had carried him from pain to hope. He ran his hand along the metal and smiled. "We did good," he whispered. Later that day, Tom walked in holding an envelope. "Got something for you," he said. Inside was a partnership document, official papers naming Michael as co-owner of the garage. Michael looked at it in disbelief. "Tom, are you serious?" Tom grinned. "You've earned it. This place wouldn't exist without you." Michael felt his eyes sting with tears. "Thank you. For believing in me when no one else did." Tom laughed softly. "You believed first, kid. I just followed." Weeks passed. The garage was full of sound, tools clanging, engines roaring, laughter echoing. Every day felt like a victory. Michael started hiring young workers, people who needed a second chance, runaways, ex-cons, kids who had nowhere else to go. He trained them patiently, teaching them about engines and life. "Every broken part," he said, "can be fixed if you don't throw it away." One evening, as the sun dipped behind the Denver mountains, Michael stood outside the garage, watching the sky turn gold. The air smelled of oil and warm metal. Tom joined him, sipping coffee. "Feels good, doesn't it?" Tom said. Michael nodded. "Yeah. But I think the best part isn't fixing cars." Tom raised an eyebrow. "Then what is it?" Michael smiled softly. "It's fixing people." Inside the garage, the lights glowed warm and steady. Michael looked at the photo of Emily and Ben once more. He whispered, "I'm still here. And I'll keep going." The wind outside carried his words into the quiet night. He had lost everything once, but now, piece by piece, he was building something stronger than before. Hope. The morning sun rose over Denver, painting the city in soft gold. The air smelled of fuel, metal, and new beginnings. Inside Reed and Harris Auto, the sound of engines, laughter, and music filled the space. The garage that was once broken now stood alive, strong, busy, and full of hope. Michael Reed wiped grease from his hands and looked around proudly. The garage was no longer just a workplace, it was a second home for people who had nowhere else to go. There was Eli, a young man who had just come out of juvenile prison. There was Maria, a single mother learning to fix cars so she could provide for her son. There was Jake, a quiet veteran who barely spoke but worked harder than anyone else. Michael didn't see them as workers. He saw them as family. Tom watched from the office door, smiling. "You've done something I couldn't, Mike," he said. "You gave this place a soul." Michael laughed softly. "I just gave people what I needed, want someone to believe in them." Months passed, and business kept growing. Customers loved the honesty, the warmth, and the care they got at Reed and Harris Auto. News channels called it the garage that fixes lives. But even with all the success, Michael never forgot the nights he slept hungry, or the bridge where he almost gave up. Sometimes he still walked there after work, standing in the same spot, watching the water flow below. One evening, as he stood there, he heard footsteps behind him. It was the same homeless veteran he had met that first night in Chicago, the man who shared bread with a dog and unknowingly saved Michael's life. The man looked older now, his beard grayer, his eyes tired. "Didn't think I'd ever see you again," he said with a small smile. Michael's throat tightened. "You probably don't remember me, but you saved me that night. You said something that kept me alive." The man chuckled. "What did I say?" "You said, 'We keep going anyway.'" The man nodded slowly, his eyes glistening. "Guess it worked." Michael handed him a business card that said Reed and Harris Auto. "Come by the shop sometime. I could use a man with your kind of courage." The old man smiled, pocketed the card, and said, "You've come a long way, kid." Then he turned and walked away into the night. Michael stood there for a long time, the cool wind brushing against his face. He looked up at the stars and whispered, "Thank you." Weeks later, Michael organized a community event at the garage, a free repair day for veterans and struggling families. Dozens of people showed up. Laughter and music filled the air as cars were fixed, kids played, and people shared food. Michael stood on a small stage made from crates and said, "We all fall. Sometimes hard. But falling doesn't mean you're finished. What matters is what you do after." The crowd clapped, and for a moment, he saw Emily and Ben in his mind, standing at the edge of the crowd, smiling proudly. It felt so real that tears filled his eyes. Tom came up beside him and whispered, "They'd be proud, Mike." Michael nodded. "I hope so." One evening, after everyone had gone home, Michael sat alone in the garage. The lights were dim, the world quiet. He looked around the clean floor, the repaired tools, the photo of his family hanging on the wall. He whispered softly, "I lost everything once, but I found myself." Then he took a small notebook from his pocket and began writing his story, from the beginning. Every moment of pain, every fall, every small step forward. He wanted others to read it someday, to know that even when life feels impossible, there is always a way back. A few months later, a young boy walked into the garage. He couldn't have been more than 17. His clothes were torn, his face pale, and his eyes full of fear. "Sir," the boy said quietly, "I need a job. I'll do anything. I just need a chance." Michael looked at him for a moment. In those eyes, he saw his younger self, the same lost look, the same hopelessness. He handed the boy a wrench and smiled gently. "You start today. Rule number 1, never give up. Rule number 2, learn to fix more than just cars." The boy's eyes filled with tears. "Thank you, sir." Michael patted his shoulder. "Call me Mike." As the boy began working, Tom came over and leaned against a car. "Another one," he said with a grin. Michael smiled. "Yeah. And I'll keep doing it for as long as I can." Tom nodded. "You've turned pain into purpose, Mike. That's something few people can do." Michael looked around the busy shop, the sound of tools and laughter filling the air. "It's not about the pain anymore," he said. "It's about what you build after it." The camera pans out from the garage, the Denver skyline glowing in the background, the Phoenix parked proudly by the entrance. Michael steps outside, wiping his hands, watching the sunset paint the sky in orange and red. The wind blows gently through his hair. He takes a deep breath, peace written across his face. He whispers one last time, "I lost everything, but I never gave up." And as the light fades, his voice echoes softly. Because sometimes, losing everything, is the only way to find who you really are.